And we are back on Bridge the Gap. We've got the one and only Guy Christensen, a huge TikTok star, had over 3 million followers on TikTok before they got him banned. Who is there? We're going to speak about that. We're going to speak about his banning. But somebody who's making a huge amount of waves. I've seen his videos on TikTok. I've seen his videos on YouTube. I've seen his videos on X. And he's making waves. He's making waves throughout because he's been vocal about standing against the Zionists and the oppression they're doing in Palestine and the impact they're having throughout the world. So I just want to welcome Guy Christensen for coming onto the Bridge the Gap and giving us his time.
Thank you, brother. It's great to be on here.
So let's get into this. I want to speak about Israel Palestine, and then we'll move on to the TikTok ban because I think that's really important. And it's something we speak about in detail, so my audience know it like intricate detail in terms of all the kind of people who are connected. So you're going
Mhm.
to be very important for that conversation. Now, in terms of Israel and Palestine, what made you aware of the Israel-Palestine conflict and the genocide that we've seen happen in real time?
Right. So this is important. So I'm 19 right now,
Yeah.
and I was 17 years old, a senior in high school,
Mm.
when October 7th happened. And I had already been making like social media videos, like doing content for, I think it was like 4 years at that point already. And so I had a platform on TikTok. I think I had like 2.5 million or something followers.
So
And
you
all of a
already,
sudden,
just quick question, sorry, you already had 2 million followers before you advocate for Israel and Palestine.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
brilliant.
right.
Sorry, do continue. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was like, just like doing whatever I wanted on my platform, like comedy, some politically adjacent videos, but I wasn't like educated on anything really, politically. But October 7th happened. Like everyone else, my feed just gets flooded with like Zionist, what I know now to be Zionist propaganda, but it was like Israel, 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 hostages, Palestinians are animals, we should kill them. I'm like, what is going on? Like, what just happened, right? And it's actually funny because on the morning of October 7th, before I had like really looked at anything that was going on that day, I had wrapped up a video calling out an anti-Semitic neo-Nazi on the platform.
Mm.
And so this was like the whole setup where I was like, I need to look into this. This can't be the full story here. And lo and behold, I do a little Googling, and human rights organizations like it was like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, had been warning for I think one of them over a decade, but for years already that the situation in Gaza is it's a brutal occupation. The Palestinian people are not free; they're oppressed. It's an open air prison, and so I'm like, what the hell? Everyone who's talking about Israel right now is leaving all this out. Like, there's this important context for
Mm.
people to know, like why we are where we are right now. And so, it was very surface level, and I was like looking at the news, and I'm seeing it was the Wall Street Journal was reporting on Harvard students getting doxxed for
Yeah.
signing a ceasefire letter. They had it was like a big truck with screens on it going
Yeah.
around campus with their names and faces, and then it was like Bill Ackman right off the bat. Bill
Yeah.
Ackman, he was like, these people are never going to work on Wall Street. We're going to blacklist them. And I'm like, this is scary, right? 17 years old. I'm thinking about where my next steps are in life. I want to go to college. Is this going to mess my future up if I say something about Gaza? So it was a hard decision, but I, thought what I came to the conclusion is that, like, why do I have this platform? Why do I have this privilege if I don't speak out when it's hard to do something like that? And so I, made a few videos talking about the conditions of Gaza, the starvation and siege on them for decades, and the occupation, just to kind of give my audience a little bit more context. It wasn't even like I was like full 100% like pro resistance, pro like Palestinian struggle at that point. I didn't know much, like
Yeah.
anything at all about Israel Palestine. And so, yeah, that's how I kind of got into it. And very soon after, it was a week, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I posted like a few videos about Palestine, supporting the Palestinian people, on, surface level, kind of way. And I got an email in my inbox
Mm.
offering me $5,000 to go live. It was from an Israeli news outlet, and it said, we are willing to offer you $5,000 to go live on your platform and pledge your support for Israel in their war. And, you know, I was like, what am I looking at? This was $5,000 is a lot of money, and it was a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money to me right now. And I was like, this is disgusting. And by that point, we had, seen, the Zionists bomb hospitals
Yeah.
and blame it on the Palestinians for bombing their own hospitals. We've seen them, burn people alive. Like I think they killed like it was like 5 or 10,000 people in the first week or 2 weeks right after October 7th. So I'm like, there's no way, I'm ever going to support what they're doing here. And so, I exposed the email and I reached out to, like I said, I was, posting like comedy videos at the time.
Yeah.
And so I had a bunch of friends who were also posting comedy videos, they were influencers. And I texted them, I had a few of their numbers. I was like, yo, this is kind of random. It's kind of a weird question, but have you gotten any emails like this?
Yeah.
And they started pulling out these receipts of like, it was like Haaretz offering them a week-long campaign to post like 4 or 5 videos about these really hostage crisis
Wow.
or this or that. And sometimes they would offer more money per video. And then there was the Bring Them Home group, the hostage family advocacy group, who were flexing out Kim K and Jerry Seinfeld and Gal Gadot were supporting their initiative already. And they're like, we want you to join in. And so they sent me all these emails. I'm like, this is like a huge thing. And as we know, as I know now, like Israel's always been buying influence in America since like the 1960s. And so that is what I guess radicalized, what cemented my support for Palestine. Because if you have to pay people to support a genocide or support what you're doing, I mean, it can't be very good.
Yeah, I remember seeing your video about the $5,000. I think that's the first time I ever saw one of your videos on this. And we were like, okay, this just confirms what we've been saying. Because I was kind of demonstrating through other means to prove the point that Israel are paying people, such as through Prager University, influenceables, where they'll do campaigns, pay people a couple of $1,000 in order to initiate a campaign. And all these right-wing Republican figures, generally speaking, are part of those campaigns. I know people on there because just like you, I was kind of part of the establishment in the sense of I was holding the biggest spaces, but I was getting paid quite a lot. I had a huge contract.
Mhm.
Um, there, and the direction of where I was going was going to be, it was going to be really like good for me in terms of from a media perspective. And then when October the 7th happened, I actually sat there and I thought, like, what's the right thing to do? Because I'm going to probably lose my account. And I was quite a big account. And I thought, look, I'm just going to have to say what I've got to say. Fight. And I actually, what was shocking for me was so many people were pro-Palestine, because I expected to be the other way around. I expected to be the only one fighting for Palestine and everybody else attacking me, because that's the kind of sphere I was in, where I was kind of
Yeah.
well amongst a lot of Zionists. And so when I came out and was like, look, day one, I just start supporting like Palestine. And then the support I got was shocking. So yeah, I mean, it is a very, so I understand like many people that I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that you had such a huge profile and a huge account, and you actually sacrificed it for what you believe in, which is this cause. And I think you deserve a huge amount of credit for that. Now, and the payments have gone up, right? It's not 5,000 anymore, it's 7,000. So they up the payments. But I didn't know this. The Harrods also, and I didn't see that on your video, or maybe you did a subsequent one that I didn't see. But I wasn't aware that even Harrods were part of the campaign, because that's an important point. Because one of the arguments people make is that Harrods are a left-wing organization, and therefore they're not really Zionist and they're not part of the agenda. Which obviously we've been demonstrating that they are through a wide range of things. But what's your thoughts on that in terms of Harrods offering you this campaign, but also Harrods kind of being this left-wing Zionist organization and people trying to differentiate them from Netanyahu?
I would say like when I do like research on events in Israel and in Gaza, I do read Haaretz like
Yeah,
quite often because the value they offer is that they tell the truth a lot more openly than a lot of American media does. Like they will call out war crimes that the IDF does or report accurate information and attribute responsibility and blame to Israel or and sometimes they post decent reports exposing war crimes like in like original reporting, and I appreciate that from them, but they are liberal Zionists
yeah,
and they still have contributors denying the genocide and doing, Zionist Hezbollah. And yes, they're liberal Zionists and they are not allies. They're not people we should support or or like I guess glaze as some like bastion of freedom. Like the left wing in Israel is very tiny. And I know some Israeli Jews who like on or what's his name? Andre, he's the West Bank activist. I forget his last name right now. Have you seen his videos? Well, he does these great videos where he goes to the West Bank and like organizes and protests with the Palestinian communities there, and he like puts his like life on the line for them,
Mm.
like because he has that privilege as an Israeli Jew, and so he's doing so much, getting people freed out of prison in Israel. I think recently he even went to like into Gaza. He like snuck into Gaza and got his like arm injured by IDF soldiers. Anyway, so there are people like that in Israel, but it is such a minority.
Yeah.
Like we've seen the polls where Israeli Jews overwhelmingly want to I'm not going to put this in the right words, but it was like a biblical reference to like exterminating cities completely that the IDF takes control of.
Yeah.
And they want to go back into Gaza. They want to settle Gaza. They want to take the land. They support the greater Israel vision. And so there's not really a left wing in Israel. Initially, when the first aliyahs happened in the history of Zionist settlement in the early 1900s, they used left wing ideas like socialism when a lot of Eastern European Jews were coming in to serve their settler colonialism because they had a problem where the first waves of settlers who were coming from Europe didn't have success working the land and building their own settlements and being self-sufficient. And this was a problem because how are you going to build your new colonial state if you can't even get your colony started?
True.
And so they were relying on a bunch of Palestinian Arab labor, and what they ended up creating was the idea of the new Jew, where the Jews connect to the land, they are hardworking, they don't do like the other stereotypical like Jewish professions that they were tended to be forced into in Europe. And so they pushed socialism, and that's what created the early kibbutzes. And as soon as the state of Israel is created, they abandoned that part of the left wing that they used to give themselves control over Palestine. So it's really interesting that aspect to me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't see any difference between the left wing and the right wing. I respect people like Ronnie Barkin, who left Israel and rejects the state and is like rejected this kind of like identity of Jewish supremacy. And then because of that, they put terrorism charges on him. But like you're right about the Haaretz, but then also Times of Israel, even Ynet, which is right wing, all of them
Yeah.
we use them to debunk the lies about the 40 beheaded babies. We use them to debunk the lies about the mass rape. We debunk them to debunk a wide range of lies. So they do be beneficial in terms of some aspects of news, but you've got to kind of prowl through that information. So I agree with a lot of what you said. Now, in terms of Israel itself, obviously you've now like basically come across this. You start posting about this. You then what's your kind of view been, because you've just mentioned something which is a large proportion of Israeli Jews do support the genocide in Gaza. And I think it's a bit of a tough question to ask. So, like, I'm not trying to trap you, but it's just, and I'll try and help out just to say my own point. Like, what do you think the reason is? Like, is it cultural? Is it something that is like when you become part of a culture or you fear what may happen to you, it kind of turns you into darkness? Like, what do you think caused this kind of such a support for a genocide?
I mean, I think it's like a combination of a few different things. I think there's a lot of, from birth, Zionist indoctrination
Yeah.
to Israeli Jews in their society. Um, you know, the Palestinians next door want to kill us, but they don't tell them that they just stole their land and they're,
Mm.
got them under apartheid. And you know so they're indoctrinated from birth. And when I speak to American Jews here, when we're organizing and stuff, who have turned into anti-Zionists over time, a lot of them are anti-Zionist after being Zionist for most of their life, being
Mm.
sent to Jewish schooling where they're taught to love Israel. That's like grown as in their childhood by their family members. And it's they want it to be in the United States. It's questionable for them, and so a lot of them have to break out of that. And for them, it becomes very hard. It's like perspective shattering, world shattering to them to kind of for many of them to break out of this indoctrination. So I don't think it's like um necessarily like an inherent thing. I think this is taught, and much like other supremacist ideologies are from birth, and it really sticks with some people, for sure. And I believe there are 100%, like obviously a lot of the war criminals who took part in all of these atrocities over the decades would be unwilling to change their minds, but a lot of them, wouldn't be able to. They spent decades in this. They have careers made out of this. It's their entire life and existence,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to get those type of people to give it up.
Yeah. And in terms of how do you think in I'm not don't want because I know you I respect you for everything you've done, but I don't want to try and trap you because some of these questions are a bit tough as well, and I'm trying to be a bit careful and not to like get you in trouble. But how do you think things could change in Israel and Palestine in order to give Palestinian their rights and maybe change this kind of psychology that you're seeing amongst these Zionists?
I mean, are we talking realistically or like ideally?
Actually that's an awesome point. Give me both.
All right, I'll try my best.
Yeah.
We'll start with ideally. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure everyone watching this, you and I know what needs to happen. Israel needs to be dismantled as a Zionist project. That's the root of all this. Is the root of the so-called conflict, the struggle for freedom. It's the reason October 7th happened. It's the reason there's been Palestinian resistance groups for like 100 years now. And all of that will go away when Zionism stops holding power. And
But
so it,
sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, it's the power imbalance as we know that Israel has. They hold all the power and over Palestinians, and they occupy their territories, and they have power over their neighboring countries. They're armed with nukes. They have the back of the United States empire. Um, you have to get rid of that because that's what enables them to act with impunity and get away with all this. I mean, other countries surely would have held them accountable by now through one way or the other, probably, military force. And
But
so,
oh, sorry. Go continue.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Israel needs to be dismantled. You need to put Palestinians at the forefront, and give them the reparations, the right of return, the right to live back inside the occupied 48. You need to, dismantle apartheid, prosecute all the war criminals, and I think that even extends particularly to U.S. politicians and the
Mm,
actors here who are many of them act as foreign agents, Zionist agents for the state of Israel. There's really no there's really no daylight between the two, and you need to have accountability. You need to have public war crimes tribunals.
yeah.
And I think when I say this to around Zionists, they're like, "Oh, you want to kill all Jews? You want to drive them off the land?" Nobody is saying that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What do you mean by dismantle Israel? Because I do hear people saying this, and I think it means different things for different people. I don't think you mean it in the way some people mean it, and so I just want to like try and understand what do you actually mean by like dismantle Israel.
Yeah, so Israel doesn't actually have a constitution. I mean,
Mm,
everyone calls them a democracy. They have a collection of basic laws that
mm,
they have the Knesset, their parliament, has passed over the years. One of these, I think it was 2018. In it, this bill enshrined what was already kind of the law of the land in by word, by action, but it really enshrined officially. It's called the Jewish State Bill. And it says, the right to self-determine in Palestine and Israel, that's how it's written, is only for Jews.
mm.
And it gave the right for, amongst other things, like one significant part of this bill gave the right to segregate towns and deny like building permits,
Yeah, housing
rights to move
rights.
on the basis of race, to
Yeah,
keep, it was like, they framed it as it would make society, I can't find the words right now, but it was like more peaceful, like it would work better, cohesion.
yeah,
And so they've used that to just develop Jewish only towns
yeah,
and not do any development for Arabs or Palestinians living in Israel right
and
now.
even
And
right to property, housing rights as well.
yeah, exactly. And so, and the reason I'm bringing up this example is to show you that in the equivalent of Israel's constitution, they have Zionism enshrined. Um,
So just for the audience, I think, and just correct me if I'm wrong if this is not what you're saying, But what you're saying is the current functioning uh, entity that we know as the State of Israel should be dismantled because the laws and rules and procedures that it's been based on is a supremacist ideology, both internally within Israel and also externally in terms of the people who have the right to return. And therefore, that needs to be completely dismantled and a new kind of processes where there is equal rights. And you can call that entity Israel again, or you can call it something else, but where all man
We
is
can't call
equal.
it Israel again.
You can't call it Israel again. Okay, it has to be like or Timbuktu or whatever. But so another entity, it isn't called Israel, and it has equal rights for all men. Is that basically what you're saying? If not, just
That's
add to it.
100% what I'm saying. You
Yeah,
need an actual piece of legislation that's the foundation of a state that protects all people equally.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. All their laws and, as you said, procedures are infused to the
yeah,
gills with Zionism. And you take if you were to leave Israel as it were and try to do like reforms, it wouldn't be
yeah,
Israel anyhow.
yeah.
It would just collapse because a big reason
That's
that
true.
it's not only, I mean, they're ideologically driven to occupy and steal land in the West Bank and oppress Palestinians, but it's also an existential motivation because if
True.
they don't continue expanding, if they don't continue ramping up the suppression, as the new age of media came with the internet and all this that has destroyed their narrative at this point, but they have to keep ramping it up and they have to keep erasing the Palestinian people because their mere existence is proof that their state's illegitimate on their borders, in their land. And so, Israel can't be Israel without Zionism, and it would just fall apart anyways. So I think this is the most, pragmatic approach, and it's the fairest of all.
Yeah.
And nobody's saying, we're going to round up all the Jews and like people sound ridiculous when they pause at that when we're talking about equal rights and liberation for an oppressed people who this has been going on for it's like 125 years around that amount when modern Zionism was founded. So yeah, that's my ideal solution.
By the way, I agree with you, and it's one of the things I debunked very early on in 2023 was this, this lie about the Hamas charter, where they tried to make it look like the Hamas charter wanted to eradicate Jews, and I actually demonstrated through both charters that it didn't say that. It never ever said that. It actually says the opposite. It says Muslims, Christians, and Jews will live equally with equal rights and will have protection under the state that is ran by Hamas. So again, this is like just fake news. So I agree with what you said. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and to add on to that, Hamas has demonstrated over the decades that they are willing to make improvements in like their messaging and their tactics. Like they stopped suicide bombings because they realized it was hurting the Palestinian struggle for liberation. They updated their charter to explicitly, address all those concerns that you just mentioned. To say, our struggle is not with the Jews, it's with the Zionist entity. And Hamas is even less, I guess, extreme radical than what I had just said about dismantling Israel. They accept the 67 borders, and that's
Yeah.
not what I advocate for. And so it's really they are a reasonable entity, and the difference that I've seen here with how the Biden administration dealt with Hamas is that they kind of didn't. They like ignored them as like it's meaningless.
Mm.
You can't negotiate. Like they didn't even ask pressure Israel once to do a ceasefire now. But the Trump administration was secretly, I mean, Witkoff was secretly meeting with Hamas leaders, and they have been engaging with them because they recognize that these are real actors and they are reasonable actors.
Well, it's worse than that because actually the Biden administration knew about it, but they just lied to us because remember Matthew Miller just came out recently and said
Yeah,
actually, even though he was the propagandist for the Israeli regime, he actually came out now and said actually it was every single time there was a deal, Israel will walk away from it. So they were well aware and cognizant that actually Hamas were being, if not too accommodating. Like even this new deal, I disagree with Hamas. I feel like they're too accommodating. They've just taken a huge amount of risk in terms of relying on the Americans and the Israelis to be honest and fulfill the agreement because now they've got no kind of leverage to ensure that that occurs.
yeah,
So I think I agree with you. I think they've been overly accommodating.
yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, everyone, everyone has exposed how Netanyahu has, because he's trying to tank this deal. I mean, Sunday they bombed
Yeah.
Gaza 100 times over. I mean, this was crazy. There was a bulldozer in Rafah
Yeah.
occupied by Zionist forces right now, demolishing Palestinian homes during this truce, and then they ran over some unexploded ordnance. It might have been, an Israeli thing, or I don't know, maybe it was a booby trap. I don't, who knows? But they
Yeah.
were demolishing a home with nobody in it, and they blew themselves up on this bulldozer. Settlers, not soldiers, they got injured. And then Israel was like, Hamas attacked us, and they used it as reason to just 40 people were slaughtered on Sunday. So
True.
it's
True. And they stopped aid from coming in as well. And when Trump was asked about it, he said he had no clue. So I just agree with everything you're saying there. Now, in terms of ideally, okay, this is might be a bit of a. I don't want to like. You don't need to like. What would be your ideal solution for Israel and Palestine? I know people have different opinions.
realistically,
Yeah.
the other one was ID.
Yeah.
Hey, you still there? You cut out.
Yeah.
All right.
We're
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
So realistically, I think that how do we get to the ideal version, which needs to be the end version
Hmm.
of what Palestine looks like, and I think it will have to come. We've made a lot of progress here in America after I researched and studied the Palestinian struggle a little bit in the months after I began talking out about Gaza on my platform, I realized very quickly that we needed to undermine the United States support for Israel because that's what, like we already covered, gives them their ability to do whatever they want, bomb 11 countries, bomb 7 countries, 6 countries in 48 hours or whatever they're doing now, right? And and do it without any punishment or retaliation from any of those countries. Like Qatar just took it. They bombed in the capital and they bombed negotiators with the Palestinian resistance and they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And so like Iran surely would have done a lot more instead of exercising too much restraint, in my opinion, with Israel's aggression against them for so many years and especially over the last two. So it was important that you need to undermine U.S. support, and so how are we meant to do that? There's so many Zionist lobbies and organizations and networks. They've already spent decades and millions upon millions. Who knows how much money they've spent on this in total? So the easiest, the most effective way that I saw was first of all transforming the American population into being educated about the history, the truth about Zionism, the truth about Israel, the crimes, and the humanity of the Palestinian people. And I say, as of right now, 50% of voters say that Israel is doing genocide.
Yeah.
That's super significant, and we're seeing right now both sides team up to combat the APAC bought and paid for elected officials that are trying to run or trying to keep their seats. So, hopefully we will make some progress because of the people power we've now gained to, undermine the support the United States gives to the state of Israel. So that's number one. And we've made a lot of great progress on that. And that's been one of my main goals. And then like, once that happens, okay, so say we finally get enough political power in Congress or we get a president or whatever happens, and we cut off funding for Israel, we sanction them, we do an arms embargo, we say we're not going to protect them anymore. They're on their own, as they should be. Um, I think there's first and foremost, my concern is the Samsung option might be triggered, which the question is, if the United States stopped protecting Israel and funding their entire military, and giving them impunity in the international forums, would they consider that an existential threat to their colonial project?
Possible. They'll cease to exist.
I think they would cease to exist very quickly after those things happen. So, then the question is, would they trigger the Sansom option? As they've laid out, they would if they see an existential threat. And so that is definitely something to think about. And that's why I, try to, convey to people that Israel is such a bigger threat to us than Iran. I, I mean, they have the nukes and they have said that they will use them on us if circumstances come to that, if they see it as we are part of that existential threat against them, and that would perhaps be us cutting our support. So there's that to think about, and then I think there needs to be some sort of international force like the Uniting for Peace uh, type. You know about that bill in the UN?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, which empowers nations, part of the UN, to join together for an international peacekeeping force, a military force to go in to the said country, into Israel, and take control there and make sure that they cannot continue committing these crimes against humanity, these war crimes, and I think that is the best bet, and it might not come from something like the UN. It might happen independently, but I think that would be the safest way to kind of end all this because the IDF might fight back, but if you have enough countries and you have enough solidarity amongst the international community, I think they would fold. And then, they wouldn't be able to use their nukes or whatever, plans they have behind the scenes for when this day is coming for them. And so I think that is probably the safest way to get to the point where then we're like, okay, so Israel now needs to be dismantled. It can't be a Zionist project anymore. Just like we did with Nazi Germany, we took control of it, we split it in half, and we re-educated people. And then they eventually rejoined back together. And so something similar needs to happen there, where international actors take control of Israel to facilitate this process.
and I do want to talk about the with domestic issues in the US and in terms of the Zionist control, because this is going to be linked to the conversation we have about TikTok. But just before I could get to that, what's your thoughts on this recent propaganda they've been doing in terms of Hamas killing uh, gang members or gang leaders in Gaza?
I shouldn't laugh, but I'm in support of it 100%. You know, I'm sure you're like me. We're both active on X, and we saw all the Zionists whining about it.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
like, these Palestinians have a ceasefire now; they're killing their own people. How dare you say that? These
mm,
are Zionist collaborators.
yeah,
They've been documented to be receiving weapons from Israel,
yeah,
to be the ones mainly responsible for stealing aid
yeah.
that's coming into Gaza. Because today, I think it was the head of the World Food Program or someone part of the World Food Program got on and made a speech talking about how there have been almost no aid thefts after Hamas has killed these people and
Mm,
shut down these groups, and now that there's been a ceasefire,
mm,
which is incredible to hear. Anyway, so these are Zionist collaborators.
yeah,
They are helping Israel. They murdered Salah, the Gaza journalist, the martyr, the hero,
yeah,
about I think it was like a week and a half ago now.
yeah. They did.
Rest in peace. I mean, I loved him. I love to see his smile. And I'm sure a lot of people here, I've seen him or know him.
Yeah.
It's very sad. And so it was Zionist mercenaries, his collaborators. It's like some Palestinian clans, some gangs that were freed out of prison because Israel destroyed the prisons, and then they
Mm.
had to let people go because I'm getting on a tangent here, but
No, you're right.
essentially these are the facts here. There's witnesses, there's evidence, they're proven to be Zionist collaborators. What do you expect the resistance to do? It is their job to kill these people.
Well, it's their job because they're collaborating in wartime. So it's like what you're talking about is Al Shabaab group and the Dogmash clan. So Al Shabaab group, it was proven that they took over Al Nasser Hospital, the last operating hospital. I have friends who went to Al Nasser Hospital who have got PTSD just from going there this year. And they took over the last medical center and were literally shooting people in there in June, just a few months ago. This is Al Shabaab. And as you know, the Dogmash clan, they are an extremist ISIS. Obviously, there was no ISIS at that time, so Al Qaeda affiliated organization. They took a British journalist hostage in 2007. Hamas got that British journalist released. And what the British journalist said was when he got released, he said they weren't even bothered about Palestine. They weren't bothered about Israel and Palestine. They just hated Britain. Whereas Hamas, they actually are just against the occupation. They don't care about any other country. It's either they're complicit with the occupation or they're not, but that's not their agenda. So you're 100% right. And if these people are given direct locations and getting Palestinians murdered based on intel they're giving in a wartime situation, you need to basically remove them from the situation. It's not like, for example, you're not in a wartime and then you can put them through a trial, even though there's not even no the courts left or
Yeah,
judges or
the courts are
barristers
all
alive.
destroyed. I was gonna just say that.
Exactly.
And then you can draw the line of resistance back to the Warsaw Ghetto,
Yeah.
where Nazis set up what was called the Jewish police forces that helped round up Jews for deportation to be sent off to camps for forced labor, for execution. And these were just like this is totally comparable to what's happened
Yeah.
in Gaza with Israel's influence. The Zionists have, created set up these armed gangs. And what did the Jewish resistance fighters in the Warsaw Ghetto do? They targeted these people, these Jewish police forces, these Nazi collaborators, and they killed them. They executed them. And so when we're seeing all these Zionists say, the Palestinians are animals, they're killing each other, they're doing these executions, they would not call the Jewish resistance fighters in the Warsaw Ghetto animals for that. They would say they were justified. And so
Well,
you have to be principled here
you're
when you
just
talk.
100% right. And I love that analogy you've given. I think you just hit the nail on the head because it just reminds me of the book of Viktor Franklin. And he actually says in the internment camps, it was the capos, the Jewish people who were put in charge by the Nazis, who were even more brutal to them than even the Nazis. And they had more hatred for them than they did for the Nazis because the level of direct oppression they were feeling from them, where they were just watching Jews like basically starve to death intentionally, and they were basically being the guards for that situation. So I think you hit an excellent analogy there.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Thanks.
Yeah, I love it. And so another question is, I want to get to your the United States of America, and then we'll get to TikTok. So the US, you're a US citizen, obviously. I cover US politics, but I'm not a US citizen. Now,
Mhm.
in terms of the US, one thing you just highlighted in this conversation is the direct control that the Zionist lobby has over Israel, and you mentioned APAC and APAC control. What's your kind of so? I obviously you've explained that you directly are against people who are APAC controlled. What about people who aren't directly APAC controlled, but maybe do still push the Zionist agenda? Like, how kind of accommodating are you? Is it like, what's your views on that type? Okay, let's take AOC as an example because I know she's from the left. Maybe it's a bit more of a typical question. So, like, she in the last bill didn't vote to decrease aid by to Gaza. Sorry, to Israel. So military aid to Israel. There was a bill put in place to decrease it by $500 million. She did not vote for that bill. What's your kind of thoughts on something like that?
I can't defend that
Yeah,
at all. There's nothing I can say that I would think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill, and
it
she
was.
was like, AOC excused it or like defended her actions when she faced pressure and backlash, rightfully so, by saying it was a Republican bill, it was Marjorie's bill, and I'm not going to vote for her bill, and it also was never going to pass. That's such a betrayal.
Yeah,
It's so disgusting. There's no excuse to. I mean, she should be doing a lot more, but at the very least, when the opportunity is presented to you,
yeah.
you vote to decrease aid to Israel. And and I think on terms of like accountability, there has to be accountability for that.
And also, just to add to that point, because a lot of politicians, AOC and many others, also make the similar argument, especially on the left. And the reason is because they know the Democrat base is largely pro-Palestine. With Republicans, it's mainly under 30s, but for the Democrats, it's like the overarching base. One of the
Yeah.
arguments they make is, oh, we agree to defensive aid, but not offensive aid. What's your obviously? I've got my own argument or disagreement with that, but what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, compare it to would you be voting to give Nazi Germany defensive weapons during World War II? It doesn't, you should not be giving Israel any weapons. First of all, these defensive weapons are used offensively anyways.
Exactly.
They're included in this is a bunch of money for research projects um, that they, work on with the United States to develop new technologies, particularly surveillance technologies that they use for apartheid system and all that nonsense. But so it's destructive. You're protecting the existence of an ethnocracy,
Yeah.
which I define Israel as an ethnocracy. Not exactly an ethno state because they're not, they have the 20% or whatever number that is now of Palestinian Arabs living there, which by the way, Ben Gurion said that was the ideal number to
He
keep
did.
in Israel in the letter to his son. That's, that's
You're
just,
right. He did say that.
but
That's the
yeah,
reason
so
they've ghettoized Gaza and West Bank. But sorry, do
yeah,
continue. Yeah.
yep, exactly. And so I think that there's just no excuse to vote for defensive missiles. I mean,
Yeah.
how ridiculous does that sound during a genocide, during a time when your entire base wants you to cut all of it? It's the way they argue for it is in this like gaslighting manner. They're trying to justify it, like, how could you not want Israel to be protected? And everyone's looking at even AOC and Bernie, whom people shouldn't idolize. Um, but they look at them like, what are you guys talking about? This is Zionist. You are doing Zionist things. And the thing is, us on the left are so starved for any person in our party, any
Yeah.
leaders to to actually be principled for Palestinian freedom, to actually be principled when it comes to opposing Zionism and opposing the criminal state of Israel, that we'll take scraps from AOC, scraps from Bernie. When Bernie called it a genocide, finally, after 2 years of it, he started out by blaming the Palestinian resistance
Mm.
for it, by blaming the Palestinian people, and there was no mention of any of Israel's history. And he still, targeted the Netanyahu government as the problem, not Zionism. But people celebrated it because we were left with crumbs, and that's why, I mean, a part of why a lot of right-wing commentators see it favorable to come out as anti-Israel now is because they know that on both sides, the entire American populace, there is interest in hearing these things because we are so starved for it. We'll go to people like Tucker Carlson. We'll go to Candace Owens. We'll go to even Nick Fuentes. There's people who follow me, a subset who do go to Nick Fuentes for this anti-Israel commentary, and it's because no one on the left who's in the mainstream, who is leading the party, is taking advantage of that, and they need to be doing that, or else they're going to lose on this issue once again because of their incompetence.
Yeah. Excellently put. Now, another question I've got for you is in terms of the United States of America, obviously, my own opinion is that not just US, UK, like the Western world,
Yep.
that the Zionists control all aspects of our life. And it's not just the politicians, it's the media, it's the NGOs, it's the lobby groups. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would say that the more you learn about Zionist influence and its history, for me, I've really looked only in depth in the United States and of course over in the Middle East, but here, I'm very familiar with it. And the more you learn about how, who was it? It was Jeffrey Epstein's, what was his collaborator's name? Oh, I can't remember, but
Are you talking about are you talking about Ghislaine Maxwell?
yeah, just saying
Yeah,
Maxwell. Sorry, I don't know why I forgot her name. Her father,
yeah,
support. It was hundreds of millions to changing textbooks in American K through 12 schools
that's right.
to drum up support for Israel amongst the youth, amongst the American children. It's like, why are people who are loyal to this criminal state able to do this? No one's going around and able to drop so much money, first of all, but able to get it accomplished to like make Americans, support like North Korea or Russia or any other country. And then they run one of the most, if not the most right now, influential lobby organizations, networks in the country.
Yeah,
They pay 90% of our Congress right now, sitting Congress is on their payroll.
yeah,
And in 2024, APAC pulled off one of the, I'd call it bold, but I don't want to, compliment them, but it was bold. They spent money in nearly every single congressional race to elect a Zionist into that seat, and they were almost complete 100% successful. It was like 99 point, or like it was 98% success rate with the
yeah,
people they picked. And it costs a lot of money. They personally dropped over 100 million alongside other groups that worked in coordination with them to support the same candidates. I think in total, at least a quarter billion was dropped by Zionist actors on U.S. elections in 2024, which is mind-boggling. That's, about as much as Elon Musk, the world's richest man, dropped on Trump.
yeah,
And you look at all these different things, and I mean, I wouldn't say that Zionists control every aspect, but I say they dominate American institutions, and
yeah,
they have much more control over it than the American people do. And that is really the biggest problem because if Congress were a little more tuned into American interests, which they right now are not whatsoever, it's like zero.
Yeah.
Zero. They don't care about. We're not funding them. They're funded by the corporations. They're funded by the Zionists. They don't care
Mm.
about us. They don't need us because we're going to vote for whoever's up on the two-party ticket, right?
Yeah.
The uniparty. And so if we had a little bit more say in government and how our elected officials acted or voted, we would overpower the Zionist lobby. But because, first of all, we have no influence, and second of all, the Zionists are some of the most influential actors in American politics right now, no progress can really be made, and that's why it's such a big problem. And anyone who takes this money from Zionists during the genocide should be thrown in jail for the rest of their lives, and they should go through war crimes tribunals. It should be public, live streamed to the world, documented, and we should follow according to the results that we get out of those. And that goes for elected officials, that goes for influencers, that goes for even influencers who are not being paid by Israel, who pushed propaganda during this
Yeah.
time when it was overwhelmingly obvious that they're pushing genocidal propaganda that is killing people.
Yeah. True.
And it goes for the billionaires, which almost every single one in the United States, there is not a single billionaire in the United States who supports Palestinians.
Yeah, because
And
they're Zionists.
yeah, and the heads of the now I don't know if it's all like the top 10 or the top 15, but the dozen or so largest companies and many, many other hundreds of large companies in the United States are all reaping profits off of the death of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian people. I did a whole video covering it. It's
Mm.
like every big tech company is headed by a Zionist. And they're working some way with Israel. Like Google's taking money to run propaganda denying
Yeah.
starvation. Oracle's running data centers that store surveillance on Palestinians. Meta's blacklisting me off their app
Yeah.
and other pro-Palestinian voices, and they're hiring hundreds of Unit 8200 IDF soldiers to run their moderation policy. And Apple's donating to the IDF. It's bad. Every single guy's dipping their hand in the pot of Zionism and pulling out all this blood money right now, and they need to go through those tribunals as well. And I think a lot of the companies need to be dismantled because, again, what this shows is that having so much power concentrated into these corporations is not ethical. And
Yeah.
it creates the opportunity to have clean tech companies profit off of the worst crime of the century. So,
Yeah, I agree with that. I've got a couple of more questions for you. So the first one is, and we'll get into the big tech and your ban on TikTok because I think it's extremely important in terms of like from a social media perspective. But just before we do, I want your thoughts on this, the Zionists who run the entire Islamophobia industry. So, as you know, for example, people like Larry Ellison, who's taken over TikTok, who funds the Friends of the IDF, Robert Shulman, who was funding TPUSA and then pulled his funding from TPUSA, and then Charlie Kirk got assassinated 48 hours later. Robert Shulman has the Robert Shulman Foundation that promotes the Islamophobia industry, and he's the one who funded people like Tommy Robinson, Laura Loomer.
yep.
They're on his payroll. And then David Horowitz, who's also taking over TikTok, which is something you were big on. He again has the David Horowitz Freedom Center, which promotes and pushes hatred against Muslims. And then you have, for example, the Gates Institute, the Henry Jackson Society. So what I'm saying is all these NGOs and lobby groups are being created, and I'm just giving an example of a few of them. All of them fund the Friends of the IDF. All of them now are owning social media. And they kind of have two main goals. One is to obviously push Zionism, and the other one is to push hatred of Muslims. So you manufacture consent to bomb the Middle East. So I guess my question to you is, what's your thoughts on the? I mean, do you agree with that? And if you don't, that's fine. Give us your thoughts. And if you do, like, what's your thoughts about this kind of overarching, overlapping situation?
I agree, and it's 100% strategic, and also I'm sure these Zionists leading the charge and pushing Islamophobia and teaching it in the West is a personal thing for them as well. I think they personally hate Islam and Muslims and Arab people, and they support. Obviously, they support the killing. They don't care about Arabs or Muslims as human beings. Um, but yeah, I agree with what you said, and I think that. What this reminds me of is recently, or maybe a few months ago, Israel did and this was leaked, a whole report on how they could best convince
Yeah,
the rest of the world to support their actions or like the state of Israel again. And the number one thing was demonizing
yeah,
Palestinians. It was demonizing Arabs as like not progressive enough, and all these, saying horrible things about them, many things which are completely untrue. But talked about how in Europe that, creating divides between Arabs and Arabs and Muslims and, white Europeans
Yeah.
was the thing that moved the needle the most on their before and after polling. And so it is like their best, propaganda tool in their
Yeah.
toolkit, right? And so that's why they are, willing, and they see it as worth it to invest this much money in the Islamophobia industry and push it so much. I mean, they're doing a great job of it in Europe.
Yeah.
They're having some success here in the United States, but that's been like a whole, since the war on terror and all
9/11.
that.
Yeah.
It's been a whole like machinery as well. But I think that's Americans are disillusioned at this point, mostly about the war on terror on both sides, and then with the collapse of support for Israel here uh, on the left, on the blue voter side, and then amongst young Republicans. That's beginning to become less effective, and it's changing less minds, and it's becoming less worth it. But again, America's the jewel
Mm.
that Israel needs to have. And so, it's important for them. That's why they're spending so much money. And it's again, it's like disgusting. They're exposing their inhumanity and their dehumanization of Muslims and Arabs. And yeah, so that's my take on it.
Okay, now let's move on to your TikTok ban. So obviously you were a huge star on TikTok. You had 3 million. Sorry.
I didn't get complete. I saw my account on TikTok just to be clear.
Oh,
I am having a lot of my videos removed and blocked. So
sorry, apologies. I thought you were. So you've had a lot of like censorship on TikTok. You have one of the biggest accounts, so you're probably one of the biggest creators on TikTok. You've been through the previous regime, which was basically the CCP owned, and then you basically had now where there was the Unit 8200 IDF content moderator who was put in place after the ban of TikTok didn't happen, and Trump kind of kept it alive. And now you see Larry Ellison, David Horowitz, and other Zionists take over the platform. What's kind of your thoughts on this kind of development?
I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, since I was 13, like I've been making content on TikTok, mainly on TikTok. That's where I still natively record most of the work I do. And just to give a little bit of context about the censorship under, the CCP, I don't think they really dug their fingers that deep into, controlling Americans like how American politicians try to put it to
Mm,
fearmonger Americans. But what is true is that for many years when I was younger and starting out, TikTok wouldn't allow like swear words or vulgar content whatsoever. So like if you were hypercritical or were saying out of pocket things that are allowed there today, they wouldn't be allowed back then. They get banned, and that started to change in like 2020. They loosened their restrictions on free speech, and so starting after 2020, you got a lot of popular protest movements that were, their footage and discourse about that were getting disseminated to tens, hundreds of millions of Americans and people in the West for the first time, and it really, I think, gave a lifeblood to the platform. Because a lot of these, like how X is important for like political discourse, they were important for like the left wing like resistance, like protest, popular movement kind of side of things that really were never given a space and still aren't given a space in America. Um, that's the context of everything, and so when October 7th happened, for the almost the first time ever, Palestine came to the forefront of discussion on TikTok, and it got billions and billions of hits in the West, where Americans like me were seeing footage of dead children in Gaza murdered by the state of Israel. We were seeing evidence of their crimes, of bombing hospitals, of bombing aid convoys, of doing what they do, and that woke so many people up. It helped wake me up. It helped wake many people I know who are, in Gen Z, who, hadn't had an opportunity to learn about Israel or Palestine or have it shown to them before. And very quickly, the ADL and other Zionists, but the ADL is the big actor in this story here. So Jonathan Greenblatt, there was an infamous leaked call shortly after October 7th. I don't know if it was October or November 23, but one of those months. He goes, we have a young person problem. We have or he said like we have a Gen Z problem. We have a TikTok problem. So very early on, like almost immediately, TikTok was identified as a problem because Zionists were having very little success on there. Like initially, yes, it was flooded, as I said, with Zionist propaganda, but that's because, we weren't aware, we weren't ready to add in our own voices at that time. It was a hard moment for many people. And so they identified that it was going to, over the long term, damage their reputation immensely. And that is what has happened. And so quickly, the ADL, other Zionist lobbies got together and they pushed both sides of the aisle in US Congress to support a bipartisan bill to ban TikTok. And this is under Biden. And Trump tried to do this before when he had his first term unsuccessfully. It was a partisan issue at the time. Zionists made it bipartisan, and so
Mm.
they began flooding in like December in the earlier the year. They flooded the news with headlines about how watching TikTok makes users 15% more anti-Semitic for an hour.
Vivid.
And you had presidential candidates like Nikki Haley repeating some of these claims and talking about how China is like mind controlling Americans because they have power over the algorithms. And it was successfully scared so many Americans into supporting the banning of the app that, in my opinion, has the most free speech because it's not dominated by, it's like the one app in the United States that's not, been turned into like this like extension of a billionaire's personality in their interests. And so, we Americans did, there was popular support to ban TikTok for a few moments, like a month or two. And then you had Biden signed it into law. He's like, I'm supporting this. And it's been a huge mistake for the Democrats, and we'll get to that. But they the bill, didn't outright ban TikTok. It gave them a deadline to sell from China to
Yeah.
majority U.S. ownership. But in essence, I mean, right now TikTok still hasn't sold officially yet, so it was a bill meant to ban it, and it was put forth by a lawmaker who's now, I think, joined Palantir, Mike Gallagher. He's a
Mm.
House rep, and I was paying attention to this at the time. It's important for my career and my voice, obviously, and people like it was like they were speaking out of both sides of their mouth when they were advocating for this. On the one hand, towards the public, they would say, we need to get this out of the hands of a foreign interest, a foreign state, our enemy, China, and they're manipulating Americans, and it's a national security risk.
Mm.
Again, this mysterious national security that somehow just takes away every right we need. And so Ted Cruz, I'm sure you're familiar with him. Tom Cotton, who you
Mm-hmm.
may be as well. Both senators were in Congress in session, which not a lot of the public watches congressional sessions, talking about how TikTok is the most anti-Israel platform that there is right now, and that's why they needed to ban it. And they would say, sometimes some stuff about China, but mostly they were talking about how anti-Israel it is, and how dangerous and anti-Semitic that is to allow to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And they posited it, and these are public clips. People can go watch these. That they needed to take control of it to change that fact. And so TikTok was targeted for on behalf of Israel, on behalf of
Yeah.
Zionism, and on behalf of their narrative. And that's why there was bipartisan support. So then, you fast forward, it was February 2024, and the Secretary of State at the time, Antony Blinken under Biden, and Mitt Romney, Senator, were at a policy conference where they openly discussed how, again, they said the reason there was such strong support to ban TikTok was that the ratio of post supporting Palestine versus Israel was like, I don't know, it was like
Oh
10 to
God.
1, 8 to 1. And so Blinken is explaining that's the reason they got together on both sides to ban it, which is it's just mind-boggling to say that. And so then you see, some people start talking about this. Still, to this day, there's not many voices connecting the ban on TikTok to Israel. They just kind of talk about it in like this neutral way, how it's crazy to see. And so this part's so important. And then you have Mike Gallagher coming out in the fall of that year saying the same exact thing. He said, because I think he had this bill tabled already. it was in committee and they put it out of committee. And he said October 7th was the reason that
Mm.
we got the support
Yeah.
for that. And so it's all on behalf of Israel. Anyways, Biden didn't take any action, even as the deadline was coming up, right? As Trump was inaugurated. People were urging him, like, this is stupid, Trump. You're giving Trump control over what's going to happen with, I think TikTok is the most popular social media
It is
still
by far.
in America. I don't know about the world. It might be as well, or maybe like Facebook or WhatsApp. But yeah, so TikTok, you're giving your opponents the ability to sell it to whomever they want to. And so, Trump he says, I'm going to save TikTok. Day one, or day two, he signed the extension for 90 days and he signed multiple extensions after that. And you have to ask yourself, why did Trump support, you know, like he seems serious about, making this deal to sell it to Larry Ellison, which I'll cover in a second in a
Mm.
minute. But why would he support this if I'm saying it's a bipartisan thing? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. You have Trump facing all these court fines for paying Stormy Daniels for fraud in New York State, and he's got half a billion or so, give or take, in the defamation case against Eugene Carroll,
Mm.
and he's lost all these cases, and he's got half a billion in fines that he has to pay, and this is 2024, early 2024 spring. He has to pay this somehow. His assets are mostly real estate. They're tied up. They've been loaned out on other projects. He's got debt on them. And so if he were to sell them, he'd have to sell it at a very low price. And like a house of cards, his image of being this very rich guy would collapse. And I mean, it's not, he didn't have like liquid, soluble assets. And everyone he went to underwrite his bonds said, no, like it's too risky. You don't have anything to back this. They wouldn't let his real estate be backed, particularly because he inflated those assets in New York, and that's why he got fined for the fraud. And so Trump's kind of like sitting there. I can imagine him, and he's trying to figure out a way to get out of this because he's got a campaign to run, he's got an election to eventually win, and there's this billionaire in my state of Pennsylvania who is named Jeff Yass. He created this venture capital firm that's worth billions. And importantly, he owns around, I think it was like a 15% stake right now in ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok.
Mm.
And in 2020 and I believe in 2016, Jeff funded Republicans who were never Trumpers. So he's not been a Trump guy. He's not supported Trump in any significant way before this.
Mm.
But as soon as they passed that bill that would, land us where we are today to get rid of TikTok, Jeff shows up at a fundraising dinner for Trump where he makes initially it was a donation of like 1 million, but I think he ramped it up to 25, 35 million eventually. But he joins forces with Trump. He meets with Trump, and you know they realize that they can help each other out here. Jeff has a vested interest in the survival of TikTok. Trump needs someone to help him pay these mounting this mountain of legal fees and charges and fines. And so what Jeff Yoss has is what's called a SPAC, a special purpose acquisition company that is listed on an American stock exchange already. And the purpose of SPACs is that they are set up to essentially as like a shell company. You can put someone's assets into that listing on the stock exchange and then be able to trade that immediately without going to the SEC and going through all of the yellow tape and the regulation that's required in order to put your assets as a publicly traded asset.
Mm.
And so think about it, like Trump, mostly, like I said, mostly real estate. He didn't have the crypto at that time. That happened later.
Yeah.
What else does he have? True Social, the social media company. He has those assets. He owns a majority share in that venture. And so what they did was they used Jeff Yoss's SPAC, his shell company, and they put the assets of Truth Social into that SPAC through, I think before it was called Digital World Acquisition Company or something of the like. And then it became the ticker DJT
Mm.
when they did it in, I think, March of 2024. and Trump's majority stakeholder in that. All of a sudden, they didn't have to go through the SEC, which could have taken years to do, and suddenly his supporters, I'm assuming his rich allies, poured money into this true social asset, which, by the way, loses money. They
Mm.
lose millions every year. They don't have profit.
Yeah.
And the stock is inflated to, I think at a certain point, it was worth $35 billion, and Trump had half of those
Mm.
shares. So all of a sudden, he's able to have a liquid asset that he can use to underwrite his bonds, and that's exactly what he did. It's reported they used a Charles Schwab account with what they we quote as investment grade assets to underwrite his bond, and he was able to pay it off and get through the potential tie-ups that if he wasn't able to pay, they could have locked him up in jail
Mm.
or done something of the like. It's crazy. And so there was this quid pro quo deal that I looks like happened behind the scenes with Jeff Yassa and Donald Trump. And as soon as that happens and he gets out under the boot of the court, he joins TikTok, says he's going to save TikTok in his very first video on his campaign trail. And he had never supported TikTok before. In fact, I think he supported that bill,
Yeah.
but I could be wrong. I'll have to go fact check this after that. But at the time he did, and but
I'm pretty sure he
when it's
supported the ban of TikTok. You're right.
yeah, and so now he joins TikTok. He uses it for his campaign. I think he got billions of views on his account and his
Mm.
associated accounts, who are ran by like influencers I know to push Trump messaging. And so it helped him with the young men, the Gen Z on TikTok in America. And ever since he's been supportive of saving TikTok. And fast forward to now, we're learning more details about that. And Trump wants to first of all, kick out the CCP from having a board seat on ByteDance, and then give a board seat to the US State Department,
Mm.
and give American investors in 80% control. So 20% would still be controlled by China, 80% by America.
America first.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, air quotes. And the people involved are wonderful oligarch Larry Ellison, who's CEO of Oracle, has been building a media monopoly, and the Murdoch brothers, Horowitz, Silver Lake. I'm sure they're all Zionists.
Yeah.
They're all billionaires. They're all in some way or the other associated with Netanyahu or the state of Israel. Like Ellison is the biggest single donor to the IDF.
Yeah.
And so this is scary. I mean, you have now with Netanyahu, to get into this, Netanyahu meeting with the influencers who are getting paid 7K a month, and telling him that the most important thing that's happening right now is the sale of TikTok to his buddy,
Mm.
Larry Ellison, who in 2019, I believe 2018, 2019, offered Netanyahu a board seat at Oracle.
You did. Yeah.
Just describes the relationship in one go.
Mm.
But Netanyahu had to turn down because he couldn't be a board member and prime minister of Israel at the same time. So, you know, Netanyahu is telling his legion of influencers that the most important thing is that his friend Larry Ellison is buying TikTok, and they're going to censor it, which you have a bunch of Zionist actors proclaim, like the Jewish News Syndicate CEO, saying that we need to be investing in counter propaganda and
Yeah.
censoring social media, and he was encouraging rich Zionists to invest in these initiatives. And it's all crazy, and it's already happening on TikTok. So, like, I've made videos for 2 years, almost every single day, multiple videos talking about the movement, talking about Israel, talking about U.S. politics, talking about Palestine, Palestinians, the crimes that are committed against them, the atrocities that they experience. And for most of that, like, I've had very little problems from TikTok with videos getting taken down. The only time it would happen is if I showed, and perhaps this is fair of them, like I would show like a photo or a video with some blood or dead bodies or something like that. And I get that. I don't, I, you know, I think that it's in public interest and it should be kept up, but I get that. And I
Mm.
understand that there is a point where you can show stuff on TikTok. But most of it, like I would like there would be months and I wouldn't have any problem. Nothing would be throttled, nothing would be taken off of the Discover feeds or the For You page. But all of a sudden, news reports come out in mid-August of this year where it describes how TikTok just appointed a new position in the moderation team. And this was a position that didn't exist before. And it's in charge of enforcing and writing their hate speech policy.
Mm-hmm.
And they give it to a woman named Erica Mindell, who, formerly worked for the State Department. She is a self-proclaimed Zionist.
Mm.
She, was an IDF instructor.
Yeah.
And she has proclaimed two things I want to point out that Zionism and Judaism are an identity that go hand in hand,
Mm.
and that it is her mission to destroy the BDS movement.
Mm.
And they appointed this woman to enforce and write their hate speech policy in mid-August. And of course, the ADL was involved in this.
Mm.
They actually bragged about their involvement. Their director of, I forget what area of the United States, but he made a post bragging about how this action was the result of a meeting they had in December 2024 with social media companies encouraging them to employ like anti-Semitism monitors of the like. And that was TikTok's response to that, putting Erica Mendel as a czar over hate speech.
Mm.
And I think it was the next day or it was 2 days after this news came out, all TikTok users got a pop-up when they opened the app for the first time of the day that said, on September 13th, TikTok is changing their community guidelines. You can click here to read more about it. Every single user got this, and they had to click through it. And when I saw that, I knew exactly what was going on.
Mm.
And studying it, studying their guidelines, they had changed their hate speech policy and made it a lot easier. And now they didn't come out right and said you can't criticize Israel, but you know how they do. They shield it, they wrap it in these words that make it sound nice, but in reality, it's just in the service of
Yeah.
their Zionism and their Zionist goals. And so you have new things that point out you can't mention designated terrorist groups by the U.S. State Department without condemning them. So Hamas, when I mention Hamas, they want me to say that I condemn them. I don't support their actions, even if it's in a neutral context where I'm not like supportive or against in any way that can be
You just
discerned from the
report the
video.
news.
Yeah. And also if it's just in the public interest. And so, they've been taking videos down where I mention Hamas. And so, I mean, I've already tried not to mention Hamas explicitly, like by word, by label, and instead call it the Palestinian resistance because that's in essence, I think, a better descriptor to
Mm.
describe them, especially to Westerners. But yeah, they've been taking videos down, and they have parts where they talk about you can't discuss. They call them conspiracy theories. It's a very vague part. You can't push conspiracy theories that create distrust in institutions.
Mm.
So they gave an example by saying like the elites control the government, and I'm like, yo, we're in an oligarchy here.
Mm.
What are you talking about? The elites don't control our government. This is bonkers. And so, they've been using that, I think, to take down videos discussing AIPAC's influence. I had for the first time ever, two or three videos discussing AIPAC removed off of the For You page, which is like a shadow ban,
Mm.
or banned completely. And then there's certain topics that they seem to have been uh, almost completely silencing on the app. Particularly, the biggest one that I've noticed from covering or trying to cover it is Charlie Kirk in Israel and his turn
Mm.
on Israel. I made I try to make a few videos on this. I made this like a long one, 10 minutes, which is long for TikTok, and I clipped it up into a bunch of segments, posted all of them. Every single one of them got taken down, including the original video, except one, where I was
Mm.
talking about Nick in that part, Nick Fuentes. And so I've spoken to my collaborators and they say the same exact thing. Charlie Kirk in Israel is a no-go topic on TikTok. You can't talk about how he decided to abandon the pro-Israel cause, which is what he says in his own texts that were released by Candace Owens recently. So that's a topic that is being heavily
Mm,
censored right now. You have you have another one is just discussing the TikTok sale to Larry
mm,
Ellison. If you talk about like him building a media monopoly, trying to buy CNN, Warner Brothers, HBO, he already bought the Free Press and Paramount, Skydance,
true.
CBS. All of a sudden he wants to control all the media.
Mm,
I mean, and they're flagging it and they're saying it's hateful behavior or hate speech, which points as evidence to that this is their new hate speech guidelines kicking in. When you could talk about mostly anything, and with TikTok respected the they could how do I put this? They could see like the well-meaning behind like the real effort to tell the truth about these sensitive topics, these controversial topics in the West. But they would respect the free speech when it came to that, and now they're not.
mm,
And so I've had a dozen or so, maybe more, almost 2 dozen now, since September 13th, so about a month now, um, removed, banned, and it's scary because you get enough of those and you get demonetized and then you get kicked off the platform.
yeah.
And it's my biggest platform. I've used that to reach like we have to be nearing a billion, but for sure I can say over half a billion people over the last 2 years from just that account alone to educate them, wake them up to Palestine, wake them up to Zionism, and so this is a real threat, and we need to move away from social media that's dominated by billionaires. We need to move away from ones that are collaborating with genocidal regimes, and yeah,
You need to come to party.com, the only social media platform that's not controlled by Zionists, by the way. Um, but
the
and I,
one we're streaming.
yeah, we're streaming on party.com, and it is the only social media platform that's not controlled by Zionists. So I mean, I would like we'll have a conversation offline, but I think you should consider coming to this platform because that's something that's been
Maybe
guaranteed.
you and I should talk about Upscrolled. This is a live stream platform.
Yeah,
The Upscrolled's a replacement for Meta and TikTok and X, all of them together.
right.
It's founded by our friends with Tech for Palestine. They're
Okay.
like tech developers who left all these big tech companies because of
Right.
their complicity in genocide,
Yeah.
and they built this app, and it's we're starting up and it's great, and it's like filled with pro-Palestine posts. It's awesome. So I'm a founder for that too.
I'll check
Yeah,
that
we'll
out.
talk about that. We can help each other.
Definitely, I'll check that out. I didn't know about Upscroll, but yeah, party.com streaming and do you do long form streaming? Because like this is the first I've seen your videos. This is the first time I've heard you speak in such a long form manner, and I have to say, like, I'm not just like trying to like suck up to you, but you are very impressive in terms of from a long form perspective. It's something you should consider because like I know you don't. I know you disagree with him, but like Nick's a friend of mine on the right, and then I've just heard
Yeah.
you speak on the left, and you definitely have probably got similar skill sets in terms of oration from the left. I think that would be great. I
Oh
think you
my
could
God.
really make an
Nick is
impact.
not gonna like you saying that, brother.
He's good. He's all good. I know you had some beef or something, but
Yeah, yeah. Someone
yeah,
should send him that clip. That's funny. That's funny. You
yeah,
said, thank you. It's a great compliment.
yeah,
I've been trying to do more YouTube and stuff like that. But I do want to move into long form content at some point, and because I think it's very impactful. Like short form is
yeah,
very great to reach the masses, but when you can get people like everyone watching here, like you guys are like really getting informed right now.
yeah.
Like you spend an hour talking about this topic in depth and you have the freedom of time, you can really cover all the bases and get a real understanding of these things.
I
And
agree.
that's what you kind of lose in short form content.
I agree. I should what it does is educate your audience in a kind of more nuanced manner and in an in-depth manner. I definitely do advise you to do that. We'll have a conversation offline, but after hearing you speak, like I didn't like I've seen your videos. Obviously, I'm like you get a certain impression from the videos in terms of like it's really good because that's a skill in itself which not everyone has. But
Yeah.
long film for content is a kind of totally different style of skill, and you definitely have that as well. And let me be clear on this: like on the left wing I don't know hardly anybody comes to mind who has that skill set in that manner. So it's thoroughly impressive, and I think you should really consider that. And we'll have a conversation offline about that because I'm gonna try to get you on party.com because it is the only free speech platform in terms of from a long term form perspective. Because I didn't know about Upscroll. Because I'm just coming back to that in terms of the other conversation. So TikTok is completely controlled by Zionists because Larry Ellison. Meta is We know the Google Corporation is. Twitter completely they've taken over. I was the biggest like I am the biggest pro-Palestinian account. Super viral. I was getting like 500 million views in a month. I think I was like
That's incredible,
yeah,
brother. Good
yeah,
job.
yeah. It was like I was like the top three, I think, most engaged profile in the entirety of social media, including all forms of accounts. And then what we saw in the last few weeks is a massive change, right? And a massive algorithm change. And I'd actually heard about it because I'm actually friends with people high up in X in terms of people connected, not high up, or I wouldn't have lost my blue check mark because I'm one of the few creators who lost his blue check mark and lost his monetization. And we've
Wow.
seen this massive shift on X as well of the last 2 weeks. Targeting on my account specifically, but then generally all pro-Palestinian accounts as well. And I'm glad you told me about Upscroll because maybe that could be an opportunity. But taking that into consideration, we've got no social media platforms. You mentioned Upscroll, I mentioned Party. What other kind of advice would you give to people in terms of like creating opportunities or maybe still coexisting in this kind of atmosphere, but doing it in a kind of more different manner?
I mean, like, it's something I think about a lot. I mean, as have you watched Andor? The Star Wars show? On
Um, I've watched quite a few. I don't remember if I saw Andor. Probably not. Is it a
Okay.
more recent one?
It's a newer one. Yeah,
Yeah, then I've
it's
definitely not seen
the
it.
Resistance story, and
But I'm
I
a
like to
massive
bring
Star
up.
Wars fan. But after the TV, a couple of the TV shows which didn't stand up to scrutiny, I
Yeah,
disavowed Star Wars.
yeah. Maybe you should check Andor out.
Okay.
It's beautiful. It's a great story. Anyways, the climax of one of the plots, you have a resistance leader, and he's making this like fiery speech, and he says, "I'm forced to use the tools of the Empire to defeat them," and that's how I feel, kind of like being like an influencer, like. If I only stayed or kept myself onto these platforms that we are going to build to be big,
Hmm.
but right now are relatively small compared to the other ones that are Zionist, you're not going to make a big difference. And so it's something I think, I'm forced to use Meta, I'm forced to use YouTube, I'm forced to use X and do all these things. And when I get views on that platform, I know that they're giving money to the Zionist billionaires that own them.
Yeah.
And it's, be ashamed. You have to like I have to like deal with that because I know that they make so much money off of our views and they pay us like a fraction,
Yeah.
but it's worth it to get the message out, in my opinion. And at some point, it won't be worth it anymore. Like it almost is on Meta. I think that's probably the closest one. X, its day will come soon. It's a declining platform. They've been losing users in the United States, maybe globally for a few months now after the election, and so it's draining out. So we'll see what happens in the future, but we do need to be I encourage people like watch streamers on Party. Uh, from what you've told me, brother, it sounds like a good platform. Upscrolled, join on there and start putting your content there. It doesn't have to be about Palestine. It can be anything. This is
Yeah.
like an app for the future, without billionaires. And so we need to be thinking of novel ways to transition into this new age of media. Legacy media already died.
Yeah.
All the news outlets here in
They're
America, like
dead.
Wall Street Journal, like New
Yeah.
York Times, have died.
Yeah.
Nobody on either side trusts them. They
Yeah.
know they're liars. They know
We
they're
read them for information. Like, don't get me wrong. I read all media. Like, I read like nearly
yeah,
every paper in the US. Not every, but I have like two or three papers, two or three like publishers in terms of from news outlets that I read, and then same for the UK. Just because we have to really like to be abridged of the news, but like we know that there's propaganda. It's propagandized.
yeah. And so yeah, so people are not going to be buying subscriptions. That's
Mm,
how they mostly make their money.
mm,
Some of these, at least, from subscriptions, so you can view behind their paywalls. But people aren't as willing to do that, and they're canceling subscriptions, especially because some of the people who are most active are leftists, are
mm.
hardcore leftists supporting the New York Times and paying them money because they want to support the journalism. And then when they realize the journalism is horrible,
Yeah.
horrid,
Zionist propaganda.
genocidal propaganda, it's a corporate mouthpiece.
Yeah.
They're canceling those, and so we've seen a really big decline in the influence overall of these, dying media outlets, and I hope they continue to die. Part of it is damaging because it has empowered right wing media a lot,
Yeah.
like Fox News Nation and the like, to take over the space that they were once holding in the discourse. But we need to put the energy that we were putting into those legacy medias and put them into independent voices like you and I, and also put it into these new platforms and create the environment where we do have freedom of speech and we can have discourse that's not paid $7,000 to say a
Yeah.
certain thing.
I mean, I vehemently agree. So obviously, people can find you on TikTok. What's your handle on TikTok?
It's your favorite guy.
Your favorite guy. Everybody, make sure you follow. And what about X? I retweeted your tweet, so you can see his tweet in terms of his profile. But what is your profile on X?
It's Guy Christensen underscore. I think if you look up your favorite guy, you can also find it on there. I'm on
Brilliant.
Substack,
Yeah.
same username, your favorite guy. YouTube, your favorite guy as well. Um, and Upscroll, my username. You can probably get a really good username if you join now. I got at GUY. I got at Guy, which is a three-letter rare one. So maybe your
Nice.
name hasn't been claimed yet. So yeah, I mean,
Well,
give us
what?
a go.
Yeah, well, now that someone will claim it because what happened on Blue Sky was someone claimed my name before I got there, and then
Oh,
they end up giving it to me anyway because they realized like the guy was pretending to be me. So
I'm curious though, have you had like censorship on Blue Sky? I've heard from a lot of people that
yeah,
Blue Sky,
it was massively shadow banned, so I just gave up on it.
yeah, same.
Yeah.
That's what happened to me.
It's just I thought it would be like more left wing, and because more left wing is pro Palestine. And look, I'm neither left or right, right? Even though like economically I'm left, socially I'm right, and so kind of like both crowds either like me or end up hating me for like different reasons. But the point being, one thing I love about my platform is like you're on here. Then I've got Nick coming on in a few weeks, probably. I've had Nick on on X Spaces. I've had Jenk on. I've had like someone from the Bright on. Like we just bring everyone on because I think it's really important that what's happened is I do think that the Zionists could create a lot of division between the left and right, and they do that intentionally to make people fight over minor issues whilst they continue to control. And therefore, I'm
Yeah.
always like, listen to this guy. He's from the left here, mental. He's got similar points to like someone you just heard now from the right. So I think it's extremely
Yeah.
important.
And I just want to add in like my beef with Nick, I made all this talk about dropping the, response video to his like segment about me, but I decided not to because that's what they want.
Yeah,
So like right now in America, we are only a majority if we add those on the left and right together.
true.
Like it's a numbers game here. Like they want to keep us divided and fighting over these culture issues when the real issue is our sovereignty, our right to free speech and protest, our right to be represented in government
Yeah.
for and so yeah, I decided against it. But you know, we got to work together. And that's the most important thing, and I really believe in that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a fan of Zan. Look, I really, really enjoyed this. Like, it's probably the most fun interview I had in a while. I really recommend everyone to follow you. Like, such a young guy, but you have great amount of knowledge and an understanding of nuance as well, which a lot of people even like most people I speak to, I find them not to be that smart. So I'll give you a huge amount of credit. Definitely support him. We're definitely gonna get him to start streaming because I think you could have a huge amount of impact in that regard. Like people turning up to your show every day. Look, the Bees News. People want to see someone's analysis. I think it's extremely important. But I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me on, brother.
Appreciate it. That was Guy Christensen. I do give everyone what an awesome kid. I mean, I'm calling him a kid. I'm not trying to demean him, but he's probably similar age to my kids, you see. But really, really appreciate him. Thank you so much for coming on.